아니 준들라다 디와라 먼저 랍쟁을 좋아했는데 지당에 general knowledge 가리느라 계시 듣는 디와라 너도 소소히 디와에 같이 드사말 하데 뉴스라
So, are there any questions at this point? And the questions does not necessarily have to be related with the text itself. Any kind of general question, questions that you have not been able to ask anybody, you did not get any kind of effective answers to, any kind of questions.
What does Geshema means with contemplation and study before you do the meditation? Because in the West, there is a lot of like MBSR courses from Chomkabat-Zinen, like really, or Eckhart Tolle, like really reading for people, I would say, that suggests meditation during their courses, and also like I think 100% of the studies in psychology that are prove that meditation actually helps, maybe not in the vast sense of like in the Buddhist way, but still people get a benefit from it. So yeah, I would like to know.
The new Quran gate and the delegate Manzugi Gomji Ngun Tusra and it to some Chegorel and Songwastagi. In it, Danganzo Pigi di Nupchogi Gom Nupchonal Gom Yamnichidan that this Mindada Redurusra. Nupchonalogic to some Lenemi Sishirajo Mark in Kabdupa Gom Yamnichia, the Dela Shudu Yores. And then they come to Lana, then they gigant out the Mamboyores. Kashi some come gi Seriba injo, Kashi some come gi Lopso Jangi injo. The Eckhart Tolle to Kerachimo de Yor. Konzogi Shadan Rechena, think Kaptu Gom lad, the Kaptu Jayado Chira. And they should have till a Tosam do Chego Moguado. Nyawada around La Duguero. The Dichi Kijashigores. And the Gom Jay on this about Chigegi Ganzogi, Gom Jala Dizamong, and Zonangpagi, Gom Tendo Nierdan, but Logaroas. Chigela and Gom Gipayula Dizamba Chesegita, Payin do Chilatan Gom Jagiores, Nuchula. And the Chesan Dini Parala ni the Jusujura Gomla. Tila ni Kishimachrangi, Samsudo Caribes.
Really, so I had Adila Chidur. That did the meet some Gomla Pego Chida, Ra. Danachel and things which they are about to Tebai Chikon and Jemutun Chidu. In a the Nishupe Katuka to Gomja, Yaborisha, Kalana ding Yenda Keomare, Kalana Payla should tell us how, Ra. Ani chi mid me pe dewachin lulu dia the kali kabur da te kare na pe tela chawdo tinde indi gala ani chi lega ne ba bed ko kare jo chi kadi ni ji tela chu ngamra ro de digu gala zamzain tu to mo chi de de wa ne sembal lulu ro cha da ra ti tene pen ba mambo chung ro le do ane gomje ne so 가시겠다 shu gomma hine u tonglen ro gom ra 소수기 셈바디 남녀간서 배치도 인시다시 빨리 내가 짜자 되게질라디 지질디 차시 뭐뭐 근데 지리고라 아니 셈발로 직선도 다에 르르르지 말아디가라야 아니 데데기 내가 점점 찍니마 찍니라와 이날에 소수 우톤레 공부 이날에 데데 찍 셈바스지 내 탑시다 디기 카유라일 카투 빼펜토고 있어라 뭐 데데 지 아니 미자마 공라 가오도 데데 차래 고도 레도 당한테 단단 난디 간서 시대에 나주 받니 서우자니나 아 아니 담보트 아니 쌈 아니 곰레 레오라 특별히 띵 서부로 준도 있겠잖아 이니 인자 펜토라 장하게 강치도 덴바 빼도 그런 저메 봐 아버지 공부서는 저서 공부 길도 하시 내가 나라서 지요 수자면도 무슨 셈바 베인디 나한테 렐레로 고메나 온디에 펜토라 이제 군일랭 견데 개요 말
So now, when I visited the United States, I also got this impression that even though among the general people that I met, there seems to be an interest in the study of Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, but they really take to meditation, and they really want to practice meditation, and they want to immediately meditate. And I think there is no contradiction as long as it is helpful and beneficial. Now, I think I can understand why in the West people want to approach meditation immediately, because in the West maybe life is really, really hectic, very busy. Life is very, very busy, and people don't really have the time to sit down and interact with each other. You don't really get that much time. So as such, with the little time that you find, maybe you want to feel a sense of calm and peace. So as such, if you approach meditation immediately like that, then maybe we need to start with some simple objects of meditation, like focusing on our breath. And this can be very, very helpful and practical, because it helps us to experience a sense of calm from the rush of our lives and the manner in which our minds become overwhelmed on a daily basis with our responsibilities, with our plans and so forth. So as such, I don't think there is indeed such a great contradiction to it, because this is one of the immediate benefits of meditation. And as such, it's like taking an instant pain relief. And if you are really in need of an instant pain relief medicine, then it's better to take it. So if it's helpful, it's perfectly okay. Now, within the context of traditional Buddhist spiritual practice, then meditation is not looked at as an approach with the immediate benefits in mind. Meditation is cultivated as a part of the spiritual path, and as such, there needs to be study, there needs to be contemplation, and then this understanding brought forth by study and contemplation is carried into meditation, wherein you become more convinced, more certain through meditation of these understandings, and as such, you begin to inculcate them in your own experience, in your own daily experience, where you become totally familiar with generating love, generating compassion.
아니 단단하게 배선 로지 샤나 라 만족이 다 미지 오케이 잘라 자 전부 라시나 다 쿠들 배선데 라 당연히 이 잘라다 라서는 다 전부 개 전부 배 시부지 삼팡 방세 로지 배 미시로들 배샤네 메지라 다 한데 딘데질 배샤와나 잘라 로지 라 아니 배 캬는 주바로 방세 슈추부지 제데나 라 Pide kora di yansi raya meju sana mabu tang dena sembo kusto chayda. Da shashu da tezi shashu landa susu jiro tang chopo chomo nyamda chamjana dona nekab jila ko jiro da. Susu ki tagi di chi pangsa jesen ji kangi do chi yoro kola. Undi nekab jiro ya ha hu la diyo da. Yang tsu nansi le samtani na ranja yale muda. Tanda dinde ro chawa. Da sho chi ni ya michi ki jala roji la sho cha tambo kola sente yori kari ni yori. 다 똥센데 다 캐머스 소소 나라 레레스 나라 짱 하마 변어 고잉기레스 아니 양 지 지자라 카레네 타마들은 집이 주지 락비 주지 타마 여여바데 메바 차르게 그 주니레서 르 땅통이서 단데산의 자신 땅 통이지나 아니 콜에 그 가드로이네 아제 치 트레스 땅에 베강이 테케야 그 담분 르단 세상은 드네로지다 티 배전 로그는 미시 다치나 드네로지야 르 땅통마 도로지다 아니 거 내가 건네 받아 베드코는 풀어봐 좀 이디야 제보다 이야 이제 팽팽거라 기 코야 보마레 코리아 버레라 토야 말 이제 고다한도 베나도 나 찾이나우도 자라나우도 수야메 고다 라 풀어데 쇼지 저런 팽이 말이야 그 니버냐서네 슬레옹orde 양아도 고야 고다 드네로지라.
So now maybe if I explain it with this example, then you can understand the purpose of both of these two approaches, and maybe understand these two approaches better, and maybe we can begin to realistically frame our expectation from these two purposes. So for example, if you have something very, very expensive in your possession and you really cherish this, and then if you lose it, and then you experience an immense sense of loss and regret that you lost it. And then since it's very expensive, since you cherished it so much, then this consumes all your thoughts. You are reminded of it again and again. And if you keep thinking about it, it grows worse, right? So you don't want to keep thinking about it because it only makes you suffer. So as a measure, you say, okay, I don't want to think about it anymore. Maybe I'll try to stop thinking about it and I'll listen to some music. I'll try to go out, get some fresh air. And you do this for an hour or two. Now when you come back to your house, then you have the same thought again. And then you begin to spiral again into the same thought process. And then you have the same experience of loss, regret, and such. But it is necessary to kind of break that spiral, to take the time to maybe do something else so that we don't come back to the same unhealthy thoughts. This is the first approach. Now, in the second approach, if you have something really expensive in your possession and you lose it and you really cherished it so much, then when you lose it, if you are able to contemplate on the fact that this is something impermanent, that it is in the nature of things to disintegrate over time, that nothing stays in our possession for long. And then from a spiritual point of view, maybe we can begin to think about the fact that maybe it's karmic compensation that I lose something that I hold so close to myself, that it's karma ripening in this. And then as such, you are able to let go of what you have lost. So you don't have the same kind of thoughts again and again. You're able to let it go effectively at that point. You don't spiral into the same kind of unhealthy thoughts again and again, feeling the same sense of loss and regret. So this is the kind of two approach with meditation. Now, if we expect a permanent solution from an instant fix, then maybe that's unrealistic. So as such, we need to understand that when we immediately approach meditation, that we are approaching it for its immediate benefits. So if we want to cultivate meditation effectively to address all the problems that we have, then maybe it takes study, contemplation.
Yes.
Questions?
Question
What would be like a sustainable way to practice? I mean, we can keep doing courses and familiarize ourselves with text, but a sustainable way of having the daily practice.
Tene nyiri lasra nganju rinpoche nesra sechik duani nganzugi nyamlen do chegoyo nasra kayo lai ki nyamlen khande do chegore asra nganzugi tagwa ne dende do chiri che nyinga yong thogu marwas kayo lai ki nyiri la nyamlen khande che thogu pes
nyiri ta chitangi mi mitsle kenda shuda ma mi mita kanda ganji setsama la tendra kamachik yabo chituna ra 당아서 까마치글한테 벨레를 하거든. 까마치도 저거 검투서스. 라. 자신 가리는 거 아니면 제 때도서 상관서 로저. 근데 간서 미치래디 배 도도를 간서 지 도도를 인zen데 거면서 까마 세긴 저러라. 라. 제가 세긴 찍래 미질래 카리자서 유지는 세긴지도 저거 검투이나. 근데 세긴지 갈리갈 파 저러라. 세긴지도 되게 질 세긴지 미 미치래 당아서 니말라나레 로라나레 다와라나레 간지고 세겐다 아니 까마다 된디 치트드 능을 도라 제가 딘데지가 갈랑한테 치트치다가 곰투서래 니마치다가 곰투서래 아니라 근데 다와지 근데 팔레 도라 제가 딱 지가 곰적이는 나타 단다가 곰투서 말에 마음방 거를 되네 마이게 라 라레 단된 따 진데급 그 가르테나 들어봐 칼로 저보고면 님부터 가르테나 내 마오 따다 참anyam도 지어 말아. 라. 단대기 내 것들 지나 야고 치투나. just movement 라. 단다랑들 치투나. 아니 미슬다 저러. 라. 티처럼 다리 까마치 디아버지 되네. 까마니 숨싱가 되네. 다리 니마디 아버지 저라. 어떻게 하면 산이 니마다 같이 두선 산이 되는 아니든. 아무튼 미슬 되는 저러. 라. 티처럼 미슬 야고 찾아요.
So human beings are very strange in the manner in which they approach things. So if you say that you have to practice for a minute, you have to meditate for a minute, then you don't really think too much about it. You will say that, okay, of course, for a minute I'll be able to practice compassion, love, and I'll be able to meditate on compassion and love. We do not really find any struggle in this at all. We will be able to take it on. But when we look at our own lives, we think about it in very absolute terms, as if life is something very absolute. But when we look at our lives carefully, what we call days, months, years, are actually lived in moments. They pass by in moments. So as such, it is important to find time for practice in these moments. So if you are able to practice even for a minute a day, then through practice, through growing familiar with it, slowly you can change to an hour, to a few more hours. And then you are able to approach a whole day at one point with the same kind of intention, with the same kind of motivation. And then these days make up weeks, weeks make up months, months make up years, and years make up what we call our life. So it is important that we immediately do not kind of look at our life and practice in such absolute terms, but to kind of break them down and to understand that life passes us by in moments, and then that we live life in moments. And as such, not to think about spirituality as something that must be cultivated when all the causes and conditions are right, somewhere in the future, but to always make an effort to practice spirituality in the moment, from right now.
먼저 취연년에 지에서나 가르치서나 지금 단단한 제고에도 뺏기 전부다. 라 취연에 레비 자와지나. 먼저 파테는 아 개마다 상이죠. 상난이죠. 로제마죠. 아, 안 딘데딘데 지금 저게 나치고 돈에 레로 남았습니다. 라. 배는 저 가르사. 자왕의 신기레로. 아니 제루빌레로. 다니엘 니빌레로. 레로 손이라. 레로 손데 가서 제살을 제어. 딱딱도 지마도. 와.
So then, if you really want to cultivate spirituality as a part of your life, then the moment is always right now. We cannot keep pushing it back. And any kind of good things that you want to do in your life, we should be able to approach it or work towards doing it from right now. Because if we keep pushing it off, then we never get around to doing it. We never get around to practicing. So as such, what holds us back is what we in Buddhism will call laziness. And when we are talking about laziness, there are three types of laziness. Laziness of procrastination, wherein we keep pushing things off. Laziness in engaging in meaningless things. Then laziness that derives from a sense of inadequacy.
Penna dani la ni bi le lo la di a ta nga che thu ma re nga da de kha yung re nga la riba yo ma re nga kha chi lo chen bu da nga lo chen bu ri che thu ma re ani kha jo nga kha yung nga la le ga pe ma bu kha ta di ma ta dani la ni la ta su ma thong ju che ni ro ti sha ra dani la ni bi le.
So the first so one of these types of laziness is the laziness that derives from a sense of inadequacy, wherein you begin to look down upon yourself and your abilities, saying that I will never be capable of doing such a thing. I am not capable of doing it. So as such, you never approach it in the first, never approach your practice at all. It's saying that this is beyond me. I am incapable. I will never be able to do it. This is the first type of laziness, and this is the worst type of laziness.
근데 자왕이 시기래로 가르스나 다 자와 신발을 신으로 저서 고야게 변은 지금 주념내 쳐야 돼 맞아체 지금 가서 변전도 그러 다 자와 신발 춘주랑 가서 고통이라 내가 개체하다 지 야부도 대샤 아케만 내가 제일 제인다래 등보 신발도 줘 내가 줘야 말에 추이니만 찍찍이 레옹라 한디 치사는 같이 온데 이제 근데 가서 자와 신발을 신네 아니 자와 운에도 두마도야 자와 녀신 녀발을 신자 집이 안게 아니 수수 고야도 두마도야 때 자왕 연식이 내려서.
Now the second type of laziness, we begin to offer the excuse, I don't have the time, wherein you dedicate all your time to meaningless tasks. So the laziness of engaging in meaningless tasks, meaningless things at the expense of meaningful things. So you begin to say, I never have the time to do this, I don't have the time to do this. When you begin to effectively investigate it, then you begin to realize that you find so much time in your life to do so many meaningless things. But when you have to do something meaningful, then you don't have the time. So as such, that is another form of laziness.
아니 간서 지루빌레는 저라. 지루빌레 다 단다 샤시다 뜻 군이. 디지를 시트 지마쳐. 아니 산이쳐. 나니쳐. 되네래. 데 만제게 칼라 지루빌레.
Now the third type of laziness is the most easily recognizable type of laziness, the laziness of procrastination, and we all can relate to it, saying that okay, I will do it later on, and when later on comes, I'll do it tomorrow, next week, next year, and we never get around to doing it.
ngaladi lelo diora pela sha dulo dojo ta zo put dulo de tre de sha da kema de sha sanyi chogo nani cho zamda nyuma mama la de.
And I personally can relate really strongly to this last type of laziness, procrastination. For example, I particularly suffer through a strong case of procrastination with regards to my laundry.
Nando lapato ngal hand di yomara. So lapato de nyuda.
Because as opposed to the West, wherein you just throw it in the washing machine, here you wash it with your hand. So sometimes you don't really want to do it. And I'm sure all of you can relate to this.
Dishes, yeah.
No to it is achievement this.
Not did the shy go me. Kalana chicken book yoda. Tulula shara koyamara. The matro shana book or the social. The can't do me a category to touch.
Oh, I would like to clarify that I do not personally enjoy dirty dishes. I clean them immediately because I don't like the fact that flies, bees and others come around dirty dishes.
Yeah.
Now with clothes it's different. You can just pile it up. Even if maybe microbes and such might gather, but you do not see flies and other things gathering in the clothes. Anyone else would like to share and ask any questions?
Tini maybe in Hazata, Nima San Kartanora, Tadangana Jangsha. Nganta tenang megi chubu di rona tanda sedamdra penang zu lunga isu godam ra tele chiba chepe ke chamada penang ngzo ge gewach du megi chupang la shura ta megi chu go su shiwaina ani ngzo lui len number su ngai shi yegi ani sumshaura tindi chu rest ambo.
So now, if there are no questions, maybe I would like to share a practical advice, the manner in which we can effectively cultivate a spiritual practice by developing an ethical restraint in not engaging in negative actions. So if we become mindful of not engaging in these 10 negative actions in the course of a day, then it's very, very helpful for us to live a spiritual life. So these 10 negative actions are said to come from what we call the 3 doors. The door of body, the door of speech, and the door of mind. So as such, there are 3 negative actions or non-virtuous actions of the body, 4 non-virtuous forms of speech, and 3 non-virtuous actions of the mind.
Ani so chepa ani majemba lemba ani loyim la.
And the 3 non-virtuous physical actions or 3 non-virtuous actions of the body are killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct.
Tangazo so chepa da chidan zang shulun din buro den sege je de tezung kawr shira ra. Das stealing de so chepa majemba lemba di 치치네 지게 레가레니 찌바로 다 가래나 수수 근데 이지 거거라 데 무시그라 미마토 나가디 냐샤고선 데레레스라 도슬레서 소지바 다네 로임레디갈다 지미제 차상에나 아니 소소게서 자마임바 미심발라 아니 지게 데오로치 아니 간데자촌 카토야라 소바강이 마무 중고다 와 텐데샤
So killing, as we understand, is something that we need to avoid. Now, in the larger sense, we can avoid it. But now, when we walk about, we also need to be be a little bit mindful about the small insects that are on the path and pay attention to these too, even though it is difficult. Then stealing, now this we need to be really, really careful about, because when the opportunity presents itself to us that nobody is watching and we could really walk scot-free if we steal something that doesn't belong to us, if we take something that doesn't belong to us, it is important to remind ourselves that this is a non-virtuous action. And then similarly, sexual misconduct with regards to layperson, pursuing relationships outside of your marriage, outside of your relationship. That is what we mean by sexual misconduct.
Depending on majibadi kandelana majin balembale mi teba mai balembara zamzang miji tane tatila mambojore jabuthone ko la digala khali mi macho jin kiya chikjira ani yan zamza thojong da thoni mile chang den thoni ya kiya chikjira chikde ya die chegdo ganzo tidang ganzo gin zamzang ganzo kumare sososo imba ha magoya dojo chala jini waina ra ta phagi midigi chala lani digi ta kemar koran sularana di koran pejo yapochi tang sho sang tuna de digora te samatuna phagi midigi ta ngid khaduragi na ngatsragi na sanjibachi dena ta de sho rani digi dabojo dad zun da ngire samna dikuma che chagir sungda ra to be things saburu shida.
So even though we frame it simply as stealing, now when we look at what it actually means is, it literally means taking for yourself what is not given to you, taking for yourself that which does not belong to you. So as such, we can understand that robbing someone, of course, is evidently stealing. Then also, taking things that do not belong to us without anyone noticing, that's also stealing. Then one of the most one of the things that we need to pay attention to is to the fact that when we pick things that do not belong to us on the street, if we say we found it, and then if we keep that thing for ourselves, then that also constitutes an act of stealing. Because if it is indeed the case, the person who has lost it has already let go of it, saying that, okay, I lost it, I never hope to find it again, it's okay, I lost it, then that's maybe okay. But in most of the cases, people still hold on to the things that they have lost. They still regret that they lost it. So as such, they have a sense of attachment towards it. So that doesn't really belong to you. So as such, these kind of actions also constitute stealing.
Penangzo gombata santa kawaii nare ngara ngai malasu che rumal didina ngasa chala do la na gegul tor ra sugi danga tangi mi chala ngai jira na sui ha kumara ngai ngara chibu suirela na ani jani ja chaji ta thu mara tinde indi na ni susu gegul te ngai den jira sun sa de dira sun ai gegu chosu di ma ani kyon chala den jira sha sui na nga sho na ra ani mo de chi gor khasna 딩어저 파기디기 동생 찌찌 파 칼로다 파 땅르 땅면 어저 고마 차이인가 그송라 네는 어저 잘라 참 빼 체대워 서서기 잘라지 라션 게고를 게스트한테 저 델레 체니레살나 아니 파기라 게고자 찌샤그라 잘라라나 센데시레 다실로라네 미 키도라 고마 나로라 짜기스 라이르가 저 바쿠도 치츠도 팅마도 다지 여러 자르자 서서 고에든 데ン친지 자르자 라이르 Jido, the J Lasan, Rakomako mother. And you miss him Gegodi chapter in the Lavaran. Teaching on to pay Jalatona Kayoma, the camera Lana Yas and the tail Tanger, Casacalisha, and some the Gegola Kajai.
So, as such, it is indeed the custom in monasteries because all the ordained people abide by the ethical code of conduct and the vows that they uphold, that whenever you lose anything in the monastic compound, then you do not really need to worry about it. You will find it. And even if you find something in the monastic institution, in the monastic area, then since you cannot go about asking 100 or 200 monks, does it belong to you or not, then the system makes it convenient. And you just need to give it to the one who is in charge of the discipline. And the discipline in charge then addresses the gathering during the prayer gatherings, and then any item that is lost and found is announced at that moment, and then you can claim whatever you have lost. So as such, monks and nuns in the monastic areas do not really care for their belongings. They are not. They do not really. They do not worry too much about maybe forgetting their things or losing things, because they know that if they lose it in the monastic area, come the prayer gathering, then someone would have already given it to the discipline in charge. Now, maybe outside of the monastic compounds, it might be a different case.
No. Thế đó, lưu sung rất xa. Ta ngã đây ngã zin, zima đây lì xì ra, zin thara chum bişe đi zin. Anu zin che, ani ta zin la na phagi la chi gogo tai ki, kulung yu chi ga na zin shi gora. Thama la di gala mi chambo ye ba di pa torchu, ra. Kyana la phagi chik chik la du da la mi chambo ni, de shule chik chik la nandu khuni chambo ye na par to she de thama ti pe dibat sab chambo zu, ra. Mi chambo ni zasang khate chu ye na re, thopo thomo ye na re, phama da pe ye na re, pugu da pugu paru ye na, kanji dinde ki khato ra soba da soba, jeka da jeka, tan ram no yo ra. Tisu nganzo pe uya ngenga do. nganzo tisan sanju da khasa kal tar khodo jeka nganzo chi lagi da nganzo jeka khodo chi dinde michi ki kesel den tisan da mun le sigra zo nganzo pe yigi thiba inare khari ne zabza che da pe kecham brada.
So now moving on, the next non-virtuous actions are forms of speech. So the first two of these non-virtuous forms of speech are lying and divisive speech. Now, lying we understand, wherein we begin to lie and not tell the truth in the hopes that we fool or deceive others. Now, the second one, divisive speech, I think we really need to be mindful and pay attention to it. And from a Buddhist perspective, this is one of the most grave non-virtues that one can accumulate, because divisive speech sows disagreement, creates disagreement, people who get perfectly along with each other. So, for example, creating disagreement, creating conflict between parents, between relatives, between friends, between students, and from a broader perspective, between communities, between societies, between nations, between races. And in this day and age, as the world becomes smaller and smaller and closer to each other, it is important that we pay particular attention to this, that we be mindful of our speech and the manner in which we engage in the many different social media platforms, because it really some of the things that we say, maybe if we are not mindful, hurts the sentiments of whole communities or whole race, and as such it creates confusion, creates disagreement, creates conflict between communities, between nations, between races. So in this day and age, it is particularly important that we become mindful in not engaging in divisive speech.
The Tzitu Danga Hakodra, Magic Tzitubula Nansang of the Nedo, Ra, and it's Tzitubu, Suzuki Tzitubu, Pijitamatene, Suzuki Topoto Tarin, Ra, and pay me and come to Shagda. Think of the Lamsa Kayu Lai, Chatan Dipa Chamber, Kayu Lai, another Missinala Horana, pay no Tonda, Ra. Tzituche, and in Achela the Tang, Millennium came in a Haji Tizu color to Sutra, Bamushi, Ra. Tiki Lojo Chinina, Lojo Chechumare, Kechamabo, 아노치 곰지자 지치 제고서네 디스삼 초라다시다 치즈데 디시메가 가서 미카시에라 지루루체데 따라 마라시니 치즈치즈바 저라 tendelida undi yang nga chile le di gar chola chin tu so thola re ni ni mi phai la nam to tren she da ke cha mambu khazu she na a de yin bare de mare me ngzu ma she mambu ji to zo she da ra zan zan nga cha da thong le de na chi ro pa de tu chi bu ro da ra ni tu nga cha tsara tsara mo ya chi shu so le ne de ma she na ke cha ya po da.
So now moving on, harsh word. Harsh word we can relate to and understand it. Now harsh word comes from a harmful intent. With an intent, when you speak words with an intent to harm others, that constitutes harsh words. Now the fourth one is idle talk or gossiping, so to say. Now this is a form of non-virtuous speech because this really takes up and eats up a lot of our time if we're not mindful. We begin to engage in meaningless talk, idle talk all the time, serving no purpose at all. And then this eats into the time that we could otherwise dedicate to our study, practice, and contemplation. And it doesn't help. Many of the things that we talk about doesn't really have any benefit at all when we begin to engage in gossiping, when we begin to engage in idle talk. And as such, it's a waste of time, practically. And then second, it creates more confusion when we begin to engage in gossiping and begin to engage in idle talk. It creates more discursive thoughts, more discursive emotions in the mind stream of the people that we engage in such talks with. People begin to now think about a lot of different things that they shouldn't really bother about. And as such, we begin to also affect other people's mental states. Now, with that being said, I don't know how it is in the West, but here people really do enjoy talking idly and gathering together. And some people do not take into the consideration that other people maybe have some other priority. So as such, they waste other people's time. Now, with that being said, sometimes maybe it's okay to gather together for a cup of tea and then catch up with each other, but not to let this dissolve, or not to let these kind of gatherings and these kind of talks evolve into idle talk, meaningless talk. But to make the talk and the gathering that you have meaningful is important.
Naksen nösem lokta la jira. Naksen da nösem da lokta.
And sums.
Naksen nösem lokta sumsha ani. Naksen lo di kharsha na nganzo gi semla be subu ji nya de da khashi, right? Tari mi ji ngal tsu ji lawe na, ta ni ma ji nge ko la tak ta ji go kholen lo go sai semla na bo nya de naksen de de sura.
So now moving on, the three non-virtuous actions of the mind are: number 1, resentment; number 2, harmful intent; number 5, wrong views; number 3, wrong views. So the first of these is a sense of resentment that we hold on to ourselves, that this person said something to me, now I would retaliate in a similar manner, and as such you harbor a sense of resentment in your heart that you want to harm them later on if the opportunity presents itself.
Nasen la da ngas khat kadura mi ji ya bo cha na de chi gi ma ga che ro ta thado de je le gi de khanda phagi la chi chewa che ro shira de gi lo de la ani nösem.
Now harmful intent is that motivation or that intent that wants to inflict harm upon others immediately.
다 로탈라드가라데 지당 남베기 톨라시와네 지 남베기 추 시샤샤네 자왕하지 레진에 좀 예버츠고라 네 지당기 지 레진에 자왕하지 예버 켈레 참 차바요 말다 한다 딘딜레니 지나 아니 딜레 자왕하지 요 말 레진에 요 말은 로바타 롱위르다 다야 나딩아도 로바타라디 지 응외네스 임바실라 마레라딘들라 콜로타이 콘도지 쳐쳐다라 남베기 천이 쇼나 샤바지 마이나 지당기 wrong will tendero chagisa tawalo pa.
So then the last of these is harmful wrong views. So wrong views, now from a very Buddhist perspective, wrong views would be views that begins to deny karma, that begins to deny rebirth. Now this is taking into consideration the Buddhist perspective. So from a Buddhist perspective, one accepts rebirth, one accepts karma. So as such, any view that begins to deny karma and rebirth is a wrong view. Now, I think we can broaden the interpretation of wrong view in this day and age, because it is not the case that everybody accepts karma and rebirth. So as such, we can understand, for the purposes of our discussion, as a wrong view as that denial of reality itself. When you begin to deny what exists as non-existent, and when you begin to hold what doesn't exist as existent, this is what would constitute a wrong view. So maybe you could tell us what are the 10 non-virtuous actions? How many non-virtuous actions are there of the body?
Yeah.
3, yes.
3.
And what are these 3 non-virtuous actions of the body? And there are 4 non-virtuous forms of speech. What are these? Then
Mind.
3 non-virtuous actions of the mind. Sticks. So now, as we now understand what are these 10 non-virtuous actions, now we need to be able to relate the reflection onto our own daily experiences and to see in the course of a day, do we engage in many of these non-virtuous actions? Nima kundu gi jison sa nga zon mege chipo tsuchen de sunwa ina ani tenjo gi mulu da ra tende gi tawela da tende gi tetong yo ma do song sa ra di yin gi nga zo di pa che go mambu chi ka do da di ra di ya po sunwa ina su gi wa tsuchen do ina. So if we are to become good human beings, then it goes without saying that we have to live ethically, and understanding the 10 non-virtuous actions and developing the ethical restraint in not engaging them, engaging in these actions can really help us to live our lives ethically and to be good human beings. So if we are mindful in all our walks of life to not engage in these, whether we find ourselves in a city where it's crowded, in a village where it's sparsely populated. In a place where there's a lot of commotion or in a calm place, it is important that we make sure that as part of our spiritual practice, we develop the ethical restraint in not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions. And on the basis of not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions, then we can begin to effectively engage virtuous actions more. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that it is without a doubt that if one can develop an ethical restraint in not engaging in these non-virtuous actions, not only does one become a good human being, but in the future, in your future birth, it is guaranteed that it becomes a cause for you to be born as a human being blessed with all its freedoms and advantages. So now in general society, I want to hear from you, how do we begin to define a good or a bad person?
Bad person
Or an illustration of a bad person.
I think it differs for everyone. What your upbringing was, the context where you in. So I don't think it's like.
So that's exactly what Geshema wants to hear. No, koila na chi koryu damenda ani chito damenda la tasu la gola ga yungro was. Ti che dorang ke jathiris.
Look at reputation.
Reputation?
Someone has good reputation. It seems like he succeeded to trick people into thinking he's a good person, even if he does a bad thing.
Tini mancha jikta indu zamba ni tamnyenda dojila dugudu sra. Midela jik mishinda gi ko tamnyenda do chimbo yana midela rang shingji yapore la do chira. Yan dende mikashi jigi tamnyenda shibu yona yasra. Yang de karsa nyejula chuken dende yora. Chawa ngeba peken dende yores.
Kala mi yapola de tamnyenda yidre relora.
Chizona la ra mi yakbo la dizamba se kande jila zimgi doya la kejatirwa chizona la ta dizamba ne tamnyenda la ta ne ra mi yakbo la dizamba ta khola chi mi gi tseba ro chi ne ra ko ke da chimbo re ko mi de re da la ne ta chi mi gi shejo la ta ida
re ane shimba ta bu tama la shora ya
What I don't like in people is arrogance. Is it then a bad person? Maybe not, but I don't like it.
Kurangi minala mishinda ki shijula magaya chejudi ni ngaje de yisya yani tadi miduga la chilang zin thugre thugmare di shemishin ras ine ngaje la di ngagabu mes shira
Harsh words?
Tsuzushingi.
Also, if someone sacrificed himself for the country, he looks upon like a saint or a good person.
Tini mi yaga la di zamba chiso na jekhana la tayin di zamba ani susu ki lubu ina re ta susu ki ludong che jora jekhab da miri ki chedo ludong che thongye jila mi sangbo mi yabo o tende chagi doas
shimba yeah
Somebody who beats animals?
Tun-
Treats them poorly?
tundula tadang yabo mejo tundula ni
simjela tonjuru
dongye nyeda tonghe de ra o tende
shimba
anyone else
shimba chifere re di menen digdra jimji ko mare khaja tamnyenda nge dala zamla ngazo mi jis jura mi chi yapore la de susu gi jeba ma ji ya ara la chida ti tamnyenda yenge ina yabo im chapa ta munda ra 가시양지 원차다 된대가는 이내 땀이라 우서디 지도 콜지는데 미 수수기 nga라 아니 미 야포 통야치데 야포로 지스네 땀이라 알아다야 주라 디야 주마라 라 주밍원 레오라 수수 인도 호스제 양도 호고 산도 호고 지 치바천도 호 된데지네 디야 코 주멘 돌렌라 다 땀이라 찌르 할래는 미디기 남리 나자진도 참보라샤 레가 야포 시소라 셰프이네 하다바다 시세 나세치네 콜랑올레 땀이라 여르데 유바나시 들미든 수바기 미야포라 네
So now, when we say that maybe society generally looks at the reputation of a person, then I think it is important to understand that reputation is either cultivated or manufactured, or reputation is gained organically. Now, when we look at the reputation that people tend to protect, the reputation that they have, that means maybe it's somewhat manufactured. That it's almost a PR campaign in a sense, wherein even if it's based on falsehood actually, and even if they do not really engage in altruistic actions, but they create the impression on the outside that they are doing all these things, and as such they build this reputation for themselves. They manufacture this reputation for themselves. Now, as opposed to that, now in such there is no true respect at all. Now, as opposed to that, there is another form of reputation which is gained organically, wherein people begin to hold a person who engages in altruistic actions in high esteem, and as such there is true respect, true confidence in such kind of people.
Tapena ngazagi ji tamhira goni gi chapshen da ti ngone ya ti jid khanile na zhenale da ngazagi tanda zhen chama tsula ra ti zaman le goda ra ko mai indo chira zhen chagora ani chid khalana ngaje디 tanda ngaje디 ngazu duo tsugora ngajeladi ngajego ko phangol digala khanledo tis nesen rijlemda ra tinne lebsorosta ani tsitsu nga da ko da tanda ngache khorana tsitsu le chete pena ngai megewona tsitsu leda.
So now what we are effectively trying to do is when we look at this kind of ideas about a good person or a bad person based on reputation, based on the arrogance that they have, we are effectively looking at how it relates to these 10 non-virtuous actions and how these things are unethical. So for example, when we are talking about a reputation that is not deserved but that is manufactured, then it comes, whether it is deserved or whether it is justified or not, it comes on the basis of a falsehood, which is lie. So lying is involved here. Then similarly, when we are talking about arrogance, so when arrogance is expressed, and then it can manifest into a harmful intent later on, wherein when you have a sense of arrogance, you say that I wouldn't ever want to bow down to anyone, I wouldn't ever want to suffer this, I will make sure others suffer. Then similarly, harsh words, now it's evidently pretty clear that it's one of the 10 non-virtuous actions.
Tatanda korangi mi yaposne ledang chi tunjilara le tangdang de la rani chi de tangwa da jeng chi de tang ra jeng chi de tang to ne yapor ra kala na mi shimba la shimpe sang no chura undi ta rani chi de so so keben chi bu chi de tang ya ya bi chabasimda ra de kojuro shaira.
So then, when we are talking about sacrifice as a measure of someone who is good, then it is important to understand that sacrifice for others is important. When sacrifice for one's own sake, when we begin to sacrifice things for one's own sake, maybe that doesn't really equate with Buddha's understanding of ethics.
Tene dundoro dundala dungde chedi nasen maybe saying you because I could do color pagila nana rochana saji liver kunuja. To some of that, she sang to Miguel do a less, me do a lad or the carried legal Miguel than the Migichubu in the maternal link. Right, Consugi Jutusa did that. She sang unto that Migichubu the any papang, George to do in me rushing unto me, which I had done. She saw that she didn't wear down. And John has a killing in so then they were Tawagi, right, Juchat and the Cheda.
So then, similarly, cruelty towards animals is also a physical expression of the harmful intent that one harbors. So when we look at all of these, we begin to now understand that in some ways, all these kind of are related to the 10 non-virtuous actions. So as such, if we are to live ethically, if we are to become good human beings who can contribute to society, peace in society, harmony in society, we must ensure that in our daily lives that we do not engage in these negative actions. And this can, through developing the ethical restraint in not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions, then we can begin to effectively engage in more virtuous actions. And as such, this becomes the causes for peace, harmony in our relations, in our societies, in our interactions, and now from a broader perspective, even in our next life, it becomes a cause for favorable rebirth.
So the other me abu jungala ani so migichibu gutsu ya bosun ra migichibu da pa gewa de tsu the kitchen brother the gala to en ji jin so pa chen so la nyang le che ani shang da ni je ra ta zang ga lo ji ni ma so kan tu chi tu che wa na ta de dio ra ji da nga ji chue chi ge la la tha ani che ro da gombal de the de ko ga me wa na so mi cha na la kan tu chi tu che ra ande.
So if we are to cultivate an effective spiritual practice as lay people, I think we can effectively cultivate a spiritual practice by observing the ethical conduct of not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions. On the basis of not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions, then we can begin to further develop love, compassion. Then if we can, then to practice the 6 great perfections and so forth. And it is not necessary that we have to become ordained or we have to become monks or nuns to pursue effective spiritual practice. Simply abiding by an ethical code of conduct in not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions is in itself a very, very effective spiritual practice.
That's all. Ani tu che ani chana sama kata patanya thungri che ni ma khanja de kala jora sama le tu che na shu ani nga za tanda je se lan len cha sa ani chana ti kala san ro tang ani san nga zo ya thema chik choy ra ti kala ya thawa ten le na chin di res tanda nga zo de da ma dan shais.
So I thank all of you very much for attending these classes, and not only attending these classes but participating in them and listening to these teachings very attentively. I really appreciate your effort in listening to these teachings. So now we have covered all the discussions on the actual root texts, the 37 practices of all the Bodhisattvas. Now it is important that we take the time to reflect on the teachings on our own. And if there are any further questions and doubts, we still have one session left tomorrow. We'll address them in that session tomorrow. So let us end the session with a prayer, dedication prayers, page number 31. Rinpoche, Moje, Pana, Chijuji, Cheba, Nyamba, Membaya, Gone, Gondo, Pewa, Esho.
Jambe pawe
Jida, Chemba, Dai, Gundo, Zambo, Deyan, Deshende, Deda, Gunje, Jesu, Daloje, Gewa, Deda, Tamje, Rato, Chebe, Jawa, Tamje, Chi, Ngowa, Ganla, Chodo, Ngabade, Dage, Gewe, Tawa, De Gunjang, Zambo, Chuchi, Rato, Ngowa, Tamje, Dedan, Denju, Ji, Ngendro, Tamje, Tadu, Tongwa, Dan, chanchu semba kana su joba teda kunji malam drup chu chi.
That's all.
Okay, thank you everyone.